Full Contact. In association with Mitsubishi Motors, drive your ambition.
Hello and welcome to Brian Moore's Full Contact in association with the Telegraph and Mitsubishi Motors. Well, we're now down to the last four in the 2019 Rugby World Cup. England, New Zealand, Wales and South Africa. Arguably, well, no, not arguably, the best four teams in World Rugby, whatever World Rugby's rankings say. And, well, we'll be running the rule over their quarterfinals and discussing who might be our finalists when we get to the 2nd of November. England showed they have what it takes to win the competition. Comfortable win over Australia on Saturday morning, but they now have to step up to a clash with New Zealand, who themselves looked very comfortable in a win over, let's face it, an abject Island side. It was Joe Schmidt's final match in charge of the Irish and Roy Best's final match as a player. We'll be speaking to the former Ireland hooker Shane Byrne about whether Ireland's poor campaign has tainted the legacy of Schmidt, or will it remain intact? Wales, well, they scored a controversial late try to see off a 14-man France on Sunday morning. What can you say about the French? Perfidious, bound to implode, and indeed they did. Warren Gatland, well, he was relieved afterwards, and he was honest enough, and he told the truth when he said the best team lost the game. We'll get the take of the former Wales scrum half Rupert Moon about whether his old side were fortunate to progress and how they might do in their semi-final. Alongside me today to chat about all of the weekend's action, including the return of the Gallagher Premiership, is the former England hooker and World Cup finalist George Chuter. Hello, George.
Hello, Mauro.
Good quarterfinals. Let's start with the England one. Strong performance from England. What in particular stood out for you?
It was a cracking performance from England. I think actually the attack looked a bit more fluent than it has done through this World Cup. I had a bit of a reservations myself as to whether they could actually break sides down as effectively as they were a couple of years ago. Admittedly, the two early tries from Johnny May were fortuitous in some respects, and which is fine. That's part of the game, as we know. I think England they're a team that lead well, so they're very difficult to break down themselves. They never really looked that under pressure, but after the Australian sort of rally before half time. I think the display of the back row was fantastic. I mean, the flankers, Curry and Underhill, were getting most of the plaudits, rightly so. I thought they were absolutely outstanding in attack and defence, and probably that was the biggest difference between the teams.
I mean, he sort of hit on the Underhill Curry thing a little bit by accident. These things happen, don't they? You suddenly find a combination, it works. That doesn't matter to me as long as it's there. And to me, it's simply this. We hadn't seen anywhere near the starting 15, and we probably wouldn't against France had they played the week before. But it just shows, and I've been banging on about this and trying to explain for quite a while now, when you get 1, 2 or 3 more ball carriers than a defensive system can cope with, it simply all goes to pot. It doesn't matter how good the defensive system is, you can't cover everything. And when Makov and Apola comes, and you've got Sinclair and other people, that are natural carriers as well as doing their job, then, things go right for you and wrong for them. I mean, I thought that the way in which they coped with 2 very fast starts beginning in the first half and second half from Australia showed, hopefully, that they've learned a couple of lessons, certainly not to panic, from the Wales and the Scotland performances in the Six Nations. Now, Eddie Jones, said afterwards that they got it wrong, the reporters, when he said he dropped George Ford. He was insisting it was merely a change in role. How do you see the starting combination at 10, 12? Do you think it would be Farrell still? Or?
I think so. I don't. I mean, when you win a game like that, I think it's very, very difficult to change the side. Having said that, Eddie Jones changed a winning side for last week anyway. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't pick the same starting 15. Injuries allowing, to be honest. As you said, England looked fluid. They looked pretty calm under that sort of pretty heavy pressure. the balance of the back row seems to work, as I said, and that's a bit of a surprise for me as well. I mean, I think it's just made England a quicker team. I thought I saw a bit of that in the warm-up games. Not a lot to read into them, but England's pace across the ground was just notably superior to what it was in any of the last 2 or 3 Six Nations campaigns, to be perfectly honest. And a lot of that's down to having 2 flyers in the back row. Hard on Mark Wilson, who's been one of England's best players over the last 12 months or so. You've got to pick the right team that plays the right game, haven't you? And that means effectively 2 sevens in the back row.
I mean, look, they're just 21 and 23, respectively. They're not, and they can't be, as physically mature as they will be. And yet, to me, they don't seem to be losing much in the exchanges.
No, not at all. In fact, I think Underhill his physicality is quite astonishing for when you think about his age. And actually, he's not a massive bloke. He's not one of the big South African Peter Steph or something like that. He's not a huge bloke, but his tackling technique is outstanding. Yep. He stops people on the game line time and time again. He carries well. Him and Curry, obviously, both very good footballers on the front foot. But for me, I think the defensive effort from both of those guys was simply outstanding, and just gave the Australians very little change, which was key to the game, I think.
Well, Michael Cheika, the head Wallaby coach, stood down from his role after the game. What do you think the future holds in store for him? Because he's a Marmite character, and I should say that. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Strictly Come Dancing for Cheika. I don't know. Do you know what? He's done a very good job with Australia. There's obviously some stuff going on behind the scenes that he's alluded to. In fact, I think there was an article today that's come out about his lack of a relationship with the chairman and the chief exec of Australian rugby. So that must be a very difficult thing to do your job when you're constantly at war with your boss almost. But he took Australia from a bit of a shambles 5 years ago to a World Cup final in 2015, World Cup quarterfinal now. Granted, they didn't really perform very well, but I don't think that's necessarily down to him. If there is some troubles behind the scenes, I'm sure that filters down to the players at some point. So that's potentially why Australia looked a bit lacklustre. But yeah, he's got a pretty good track record. I'm sure someone will snap him up in World Rugby somewhere.
It also doesn't help if your best player becomes a religious maniac and gets himself banned, does it? Really, that's not something that you can necessarily plan for. Well, look. They've got New Zealand up next time. I'm not being disrespectful when I say I think the winner of that game may well take the whole lot. But if they were judging him at sort of 8 and a bit out of 10, they're going to have to be nearly 10 if they play New Zealand, especially if New Zealand play the way they have been doing. To me, I mean, when they've got players that they've just discovered, they're able to throw Goodhue in, fine. No one really knows about him. They've got faith in him, delivers the goods. Yeah. And then you augment that with someone like, Aaron Smith. What a fantastic player. Yeah, all that experience. The way he took that first try, when he saw it, stepped offside, he thought, they're going to be retreating now, so I'll run at him. Just a snap. Yeah. Just instinctive knowledge of what to do, when to do, where to do it.
It was genuinely through that gap in the blink of an eye. He almost blinked, he missed it. It was incredible. I mean, he had a fantastic game. He's a very, very sharp scrum half, a really good rugby brain. But the All Blacks look a different team with Brodie Retallick in the side. I mean, not that they were poor in the group stage as well. Retallick was injured, but it just gives them another dimension, which I don't think any other second row in the world can do. He's got the handling ability of a centre. He's got the carrying ability of a back row. He's got the 6'10" or whatever he is. So he's a great line out forward, and he just non-stop workers. 80 minutes after spending 7 or 8 weeks out injured. And he does make the team look different. I don't think he's the key necessarily, because they've done pretty well without him. But I think he just takes them to the next level. And as you say, the sort of the no names that no one's ever heard of on the wing in the centre, they'd stroll into any other team in the world. It's incredible how New Zealand manufacture these sort of players out of nothing almost, and slot them in, and they all seem to be world class pretty much straight away. I think they were obviously pre-match favourites, pre-tournament favourites. They always are. And I've seen nothing in this tournament so far to convince him otherwise, to be honest.
And the good thing is that you can't say that England don't have a chance, and it's not just a very outside chance. They've got a reasonable chance. They'll have to play very well. In particular, Eddie Jones has called New Zealand the best sporting side of all time. In terms of a franchise, I think they probably are, actually. Yeah. I've got my own ideas. Let you go first. What are England going to have to do particularly well if they are going to beat?
It's the same. It's the same any time you play the All Blacks. You just got to be almost mistake free, which is why it's so difficult to beat them. You know, playing for 80 minutes in Test rugby and not making mistakes is tough. Some of the silly penalties that actually England seem to have dried up in that quarter final were gone. You can't have any of those. You can't be making silly turnovers and just you've got to execute everything, and you've got to be on top of that. You've got to be physical. You've got to be quick. You've got to be aggressive around the field. It's no coincidence that they're the best team in potentially in sport because they have been there for so long, and you could take any of the All Black teams for the last 50 years and probably they'd be there or thereabouts in that poll as well. So yeah, the teams that beat them, Ireland beat them recently, simply just out sort of muscled them, really got on top of them physically, and once you've got them down, you've got to keep them down and sort of really stick your foot on their neck. But easier said than done.
Yeah, a couple of things for me. You know, England have more ball carriers, more line breakers than even South Africa with their power, or Wales with their obduracy and their tenacity. And I think that is in their favour. If they do create chances, then obviously they've got to take them. But this is the point for me, and this has been hit and miss for a while with England. Their kicking game has to be absolutely spot on. Definitely. Because if you give their backfield runners, inspired by Barrett and, you're talking no end of pace, but also intelligence. If you're not spot on with that, and that's been not absolutely right at times, then they'll cut you to shreds. Absolutely,
yeah. And you're right. I mean, particularly in terms of box kicking, England's kicking game has been pretty poor at times, Six Nations, and even in this tournament. I think they're probably kicking more now than they ever have. So you'd have thought if you're doing that as part of your game plan, you want to get it pretty good, get the chase pretty down sharp. But yeah, you kick to Bowden Barrett and Sevu Reece. They'll run it back at you with interest. That goes without saying. You've got to be tight there. The chase has got to be good. If you're going to kick, which you do need to kick. If you're going to kick, you've got to make sure the kick's in the right place, the chase is set, and then you make your tackles on when you finally get up there.
Well, to say that Ireland's performance was disappointing would probably be an understatement. Not taking anything away from what was a very complete and good all-round All Black performance. Why don't we speak about that and Joe Schmidt's legacy in general to the sort of man you can get on a plane and go to Singapore with just for one day. It's Shane Byrne, who I had the pleasure of escorting, or did he escort me out to Singapore a few weeks ago? He's a former Ireland and Lions hooker, and he's here now. Hello, Shane.
Hey, Brian.
How are you?
Yeah, good.
Good, mate. Not just this World Cup, but what do you think has really gone wrong for Ireland since their heydays in 2018?
Well, I think, there's no doubt about it that 2018 was the peak of Joe Schmidt's Irish team. It had been a long time building up to that point. You would probably say that for 2 seasons before then, they were probably leading the charge. They were a very hard side to deal with, very difficult to beat, playing some fantastic rugby. But by being that side, you're also the most analysed team. And come 2019, when it came around, I think that they had been figured out. And the way that England dismantled them in the Six Nations in 2019 was the start of what looks like to have been the end of the way Ireland had played and been able to figure teams out. And unfortunately, our team just didn't move on. The attack never varied enough that it would start challenging teams' defence, and Ireland and the players, there's a lot of very senior players there, had probably peaked in 2018, which is unfortunate for the way it is when looking at World Cups. It's delivered immensely for the record books for Ireland, with Grand Slams, championship wins, tour wins away from home, series wins in Australia, wins on South African soil, etc. First wins against New Zealand. But for a World Cup cycle, unfortunately, it was a year out.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's gone and Rory Best has gone. What about the likes of Carney, Johnny Sexton too? Do you think it would be in Ireland's interest not to have a complete sweep, because I don't think you can do that, it doesn't work, but to have a relatively root and branch clear out of players who are certainly not going to make the next World Cup, and then build from there?
Yeah, I think you're dead right. A root and branch clear out doesn't work. We've seen some teams do that and it's never effective. I think what needs to happen is that, yes, the eye needs to go on the 4-year rotation. Ireland, because we're a small union, we need the funds. The Six Nations have to work for us. So the intention has always been on having a successful Six Nations side. But I really do think, you mentioned there at the start, this almost a hoodoo of the quarterfinals and not being able to progress past there is something that needs to be looked at. So in regards to moving players on, I think the best way of looking at that, Andy Farrell should look at it, if there is a 50-50 call, if there's a tight call, you favour the guy who's going to be there in 4 years and you start using these players. Now, Johnny Sexton is probably still safe in that respect. Peter O'Mahony has competition there. Jordan Larmour is waiting in the wings at full back. I think those kind of decisions need to be made now so that we are looking, yes, we have to guarantee Six Nations still we're competitive, but also that there's a World Cup down 4 years along the line that we need to get ready for.
Shane, it's George Chuter here, mate.
Hey, George, how are you doing, buddy?
Yeah, good, mate. Listen, I want to dwell on that a little bit more here. You talked about the Ireland in the World Cup, the hoodoo. They've never won a knockout game in any of the World Cups that they've been in. What do you think personally they need to change, or what's gone wrong with them because they've had some cracking teams, they've had some Grand Slam winning teams in those times in between World Cups. As you said, this one here, just beating the All Blacks. What do you think personally that the Irish need to do to get over that hump and win a knockout game in the World Cup?
Yeah, well, I suppose there's different reasons for each time. I was in 2 World Cups myself, and I know that each scenario was slightly different. A lot of the times Ireland normally has to have to get through in the position that they are. A lot of the times their last pool game has been an absolute cracker, and therefore the mental resilience to keep going from one game to the next hasn't been there. And then we all remember the last World Cup where in 2015 where we had just an unbelievable injury, a lot of casualties in the last pool game, and that really affected the team, and it showed up that we didn't have the depth and talent which Joe Schmidt then said about doing. But as I alluded to earlier on, I really do think it's part of the psyche isn't about the World Cups with Ireland. It's always been about the Six Nations. It's always been just about the next tournament. And I really do think that we need to get the long-term thinking cap on and start blooding players. Like, say, for instance, put the captaincy with a player who is going to be there for the next World Cup. That'd be one thing. Put it with a player who's going to be there, for even 2 World Cups going forward. And, just putting that thought process in place that it is World Cup that we're focused on. But unfortunately, it has become a real elephant in the room. It is a massive, massive thing at this point because, as you say, we've gone into World Cups with sides that are well capable of doing well in the knockout stages, but never got there.
Who do you think that might be? Ryan? Henderson?
Yeah, Henshaw. Probably Ryan is probably the most likelihood. Speaking with Leo Cullen, personally, he thinks he'd be well able to do it. But you got to remember, even though he plays like a seasoned international, this kid is only a kid. He's just gone 22, and hopefully injury-free. He's a long, long run ahead of him. But I think that we deliberately need to do some things like that just to make the focus that we do focus on, on the World Cup. I know I'm repeating myself, but the fact is that it's something that we've never done. We've never stated each other country, they always seem to get it right. They're leading into us. They might cough and splutter in the middle of the 4-year period, but they get ready for World Cups, and we just haven't done that.
Shane, well, we will see. I'm sure you agree with me that Joe Schmidt's legacy is a good one, despite it finishing on a bad note. He's left Irish Rugby in a far better state than it was when he arrived. It's great to speak to you again, mate. Take care.
No problem. Take care, guys.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Everyone's ambitions are different. You can climb to the top, or you could take on uphill battles of a different kind. You can explore for hundreds of miles, or you could begin a bigger journey. You can make time fly, or you could make it stand still. The Mitsubishi SUV range, drive your ambition.
Now then, time to talk about the French. What can you say about the French? Imploded again. Irrespective of the decision at the end, which was a controversial one about whether it was ripped, whether it was offside, whether they pushed early, whether it wasn't strict, all sorts of things. The fact is that getting yourself down to 14 men halfway through the game, and then at a crucial scrum, not putting 8 men in. So when the ball gets to the back of second row's feet, you've got no one to pick it up if he's retreating. It's just so basic to me that you have to be a complete idiot, to get these things wrong. And there's something definitely psychologically wrong with the French in these games. It's beyond argument to me. And you can say what you like about, Warren Gatland's side. They stuck in there, they hung in there, and they are through to another World Cup semi-final. They've got South Africa coming up. It will be a titanic clash, not least because two sides who have majored on defence so far, and we'll see how far that takes them. Well, why don't we get the thoughts of someone who should be able to help us? It's the former Wales scrum half, Rupert Moon, who's here. Hello, Rupert.
How are you?
Hello, mate. Warren Gatland, very honest after the game. I think he was right. So the better side lost the match. At what point did you believe Wales would actually get over the line, if at all?
It's a bizarre sense of, even when we weren't playing well, I always felt that we were going to pip them. I know it's an unusual thing to think of, but I think the fact I've been around this squad for a few years doing charity functions and been very fortunate to have spent some time with the players and Gatland. And there's not an arrogance, there's a self-belief which is I've seen in certain teams over many generations, and this lot have got a belief that they can win in 79, 58 on the clock. And even though we weren't performing to the level that we could, we're all familiar with the French ability to do something a little bit extraordinary, and they start looking at each other, and then the cracks appear. So I think that's I always bizarrely believed that we could.
Do you think they can overcome South Africa without Jonathan Davies?
Well, that's my only concern, and that was what I did a talk. I've been in Japan, and I've been over there for the first 2 games, and I said the only problem we would have if either 10, one centre or 110 got badly injured, and so they couldn't perform. We found that we could just about get by because we played a limited game to beat France, which was hold on to ball, just be structured, whereas against the South Africans, they're just going to line us up, and they'll love it if we keep coming down certain channels. So we have to be a little bit more creative. So I'm hoping that some miracle that St David will do something wonderful to help Jonathan Davies appear on Sunday.
Rupert, it's George Chuter here, mate.
George, how you doing, mate?
Good. Josh Navidi has been ruled out for the rest of the tournament. Gatland has made the slightly odd decision potentially, but bringing another back in rather than the forward to replace him. Do you think that's, as an ex-back yourself, I'm sure you're all over that one, yeah?
Yeah, well, I think there was obviously the questions about the forwards and back selection initially, and they went forward orientated, and they took a few gambles based on that. And I think that paid dividends, and it served its purpose for this period. But I agree, they're a bit wafer thin behind with scrum halves on the wing, even though there are exceptional scrum halves on the wings that do magical things. I think, it would be a wise move, because I think Shingler's come through as well, and that's the good thing. I'm pleased for him. And yes, Josh Navidi is a loss, but not, it's a manageable loss, if that makes sense. So I'm okay with that.
Well, I don't think anyone could genuinely accuse me of being a Francophile, but I do think that, and this happens, I'm not saying that anything's deliberate, I'm not pointing any fingers at all. I thought Wales got the rub of the green on a couple of decisions. Let's look at a couple of them. What about the try in the end? What was your view of that?
Yeah, I've seen them not being given. I really have, and it is about the relationship that you've built up over time. You listen to Sam Warburton talk about relationship management of officials, and he did that over a decade. Wales are always very nice to all referees and go out of their way never, ever to disrespect them. Even you can do it in a veiled way. And we know that. We can give a jibe and a shot and a bit of a kick in the shin to him. But Gatland's been very clever, and Howley and McBride all have been gracious in victory and in defeat, regardless of the decisions that may have gone against us. And I think that whole Sam Warburton 2011 one, that was a big call made, but we haven't gone on about it for the last 8 years. And this one, sometimes, you reap what you sow, and the relationship of looking after and being gracious was where the fine line, literally it was, it was a step. When you look at Thomas Williams step in one way, Tipperick step in the other, it was freakishly wonderful. And St David did it, and it just happens, doesn't it? It just happens. We've played in many games, doesn't it? It just happens, and that's why it's the stars are aligning for this team to get to the final.
As a neutral, I couldn't say it definitely went forward, or was it a rip, etc. Exactly. To me, a bigger question was whether the scrum half was offside. But there's another one in the first half. When France knocked the ball on in the Welsh 22, Wales then, they didn't just have two passes that could be intercepted. They had another breakdown from which they could have done anything. Then they chose to run it. Then they, messed up and he went under the post. And to me, that's sort of that advantage from a knock-on as opposed to a penalty. That's just far too long for me.
Yeah, and I've seen them both ways, and I think that one it was a sideways. It was a one phase and a pass, and it was quick enough, I thought, to be able to go back to it. But again, I have seen, depending on the which way the wind is blowing, that the advantage law is extended or reduced. And fortunately, on this occasion, Ken would have had a difficult one to deal with after that pass. But that's where the things that could go right did go right, and we won ugly. And no one ever remembers this in years to come, will they? Except that elbow in the bloke's chops. I feel for Piper. Have you seen that picture that they put up?
Yeah, we were going to discuss that.
Oh my God! Of all the things not to do, my mate sent me that. I was like, oh my God! Of all the things not to do.
So you got South Africa next in the semi-final, obviously.
Yep. Do
you think that based off the French game, what did Wales need to do differently or the same to beat South Africa?
I think we just go back to the defensive game that we have played, and that we lock up tight. And I think that's where they built their game for many, many years, is be ridiculously solid and organised. The lack of creativity, hopefully, from South Africa will help us, because they're big boys who like to run straight, and hopefully that suits us. But also we need these talisman players to do some magic, and I'm believing that George North is going to just flicker into light, because he's been waiting in the wings to do something spectacular. And I think cometh the hour, cometh the man.
Well, to me, it's essential that Wales get their back three, who are very good individually and collectively, into the game from more than just the odd opportunity that poor kicks, give them in counter-attacks. Because I don't think there'll be that many poor kicks from South Africa. Their tactical kicking is pretty good. The halfbacks pretty astute at that. So I think, I just feel Wales have got to have the ambition and find ways to get them into play more, when they've got the ball from their own set plays.
Look, Gatland has been building towards this one for the last two World Cups. This is the one he really believed the squad would come of age at, and the new talent would be of a level that they could add impact, like Reece Carey. Yes, they have to. I believe there's a sleeve or there's a little playbook that they've been practicing in Turkey that they're going to pull out of his folder and use against South Africa. He's the type of bloke that does, and that's the understanding I have, is that they have few bits that they know that they're going to use against a team like South Africa because they know them inside out, and they'd have believed that they'll be in this position, and so they will have planned meticulously for the fact that they're going to do this. And I agree with you. It has to be back three. We need some mercurialism, and we need Hadley Parks' hand to heal a little bit more, which is quite remarkable that he's been playing with a broken hand since the start. But he needs his wingman, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't have any doubt that Wales will front up physically. I have no problem with that. It's just that aspect of it. But we will see, and it will be exciting. Great to speak to you again, Rupert. Thanks, mate.
Top man. Take care, fellas.
Well, he brought up before we had a chance, but I was going to bring it up with you anyway. Look, you see a picture later that evening with Welsh fans mocking the red card that he'd shown to France's Sebastian Vermaelen. Well, first of all, Vermaelen was an idiot. Not only for elbowing, but he had the guy by the neck anyway, so it was going to be a penalty at the very least. So if you don't think these things will be picked up, especially when you're 6'9",
yeah,
you know, you're hardly inconspicuous, are you?
Well, you struggle to get away with it in your day, Mauro, let alone now with
I don't know
30 odd cameras on the picture, whatever it is. But
I mean, look, this is it to me. I don't know the circumstances. I'm willing to believe it was on a night out. You know, someone's had it. Let's have a picture. Do something silly. Shouldn't have done it. I mean, the thing is, he ought to know better. Yeah,
it looks like he's in the hotel lobby, I think, with
exactly.
a group of fans. So there's no suggestion he's out boozing with them. But yeah, it's incredibly stupid thing to do, because these days with social media, just things that you have to think twice about everything you do. Particularly if you're a public figure like a sportsman, or in this case a referee. I'm sure this is after the game. So
I would have gone so far as to say to him, look, Jaco, bearing in mind some people like me, who were completely disinterested party, you know, neutral, thought that you gave them the rub of the green in the Welsh. I'm not saying anymore. That happens. Yeah. There may have been reasons for that. I would have been saying to him, don't have any pictures taken at all. Yeah. With either sets of fans, because you'll just get accused. Yeah. Of course, you can't win.
It's just
if it's just a polite refusal, say, look, I'm in this. You could have said, I'm in this position. World Rugby have said I shouldn't do that because of this, and they'd have had to accept that.
Yeah, it is just a real, shows a real lack of judgment. I think a lack of sort of. I can't take the temperature of the current environment after the game. It just, I say, I'm sure there's no malice in it. There's certainly no suggestion that he was biased towards the Welsh. And as you said, games go that way. Sometimes you get the rub of the green, but like you say, the whole picture of it all, and excuse the pun, the whole picture that it paints is just pretty poor. And I'm sure there'll be a bit of repercussions.
I think it's right that we read out what World Rugby has said about this. World Rugby is aware of a picture on social media of referee Jaco Piper with a group of Wales fans taken after last night's quarter-final between Wales and France. It would be inappropriate to comment further while we are establishing the facts. So, don't say anything until you know everything. Just want to go back to that thing in the first half. The law says, for an advantage, this is from a knock-on. It can either be territorial or it can be tactical, i.e. you get the ball to play in the way you want. So if they knock on just before your line and you're the last player and you get it, and there's suddenly four they were attackers and now going to be defenders, you're not going to get an advantage. But that's not what happened here. Wales actually got another breakdown from which they could have boxed the ball, they could have kicked it long, they could have picked it up and driven. They chose to pass it, and then they did what they did. Now, to me, before the incident, they were facing a French attack in their 22. After the knock-on, they had a breakdown ball which was totally under control. So to me, that is an advantage. It's enough.
I agree 100% with you, Mauro. But as Rupert Moon said, we've seen it given both ways, haven't we? The advantage law is very dependent on the referee. Some of them are very quick and generous with it. Some of them are take a bit longer time. But the only thing I can think of is that there actually wasn't that territorial advantage. They had a breakdown. Yes, they had the ball under control, but they hadn't actually progressed from the knock-on infringement area, particularly, I think. But that would be the only reason I can see it not being an advantage over. But I suspect if that ball had been passed another set of hands, then it would have been an advantage over. But yeah, like I say, you can see it both ways. I'm with you. I do agree that should have been a try to the French, but the referee saw it otherwise.
Well, the last quarter-final of the weekend saw the hosts Japan, their incredible campaign, and let's pay tribute to them. They've been inspirational, they've been skillful, tremendous hosts, they've been brave. And look, it's been reported today that Sanzar are meeting to discuss their inclusion in the 2019 Rugby Championship and also the return of the Sunwolves to Super Rugby. Now, if that does happen, it will be a reward not just for this performance, but, for a couple of years prior to 2015 and the win then and the progress they've made. Some Wolves have struggled in the Super 15 because they're a relatively new franchise, but of course you're going to struggle. The South African sides that came into the Pro 14, the Italian sides, they struggled, and now you're starting to see, certainly with Benetton Treviso, that they can get there, and it's essential to me that you give these teams not just. And I would like them to go further. Yeah, include them. But I'd like to see the automatic right, however you structure it. We've been through this before. For teams who replicate that, and they won't get in until they do replicate it and deserve it, to do that. But if that is right, how far do you think Japan can go as a force?
Well, I mean, the sky is the limit in a lot of ways. I think the Japanese public, they love sport, so if this sort of wave continues, they'll be well supported. So you'll get people in the stadiums, which generates money for you. Perhaps the only obstacle would be natural players from Japan, actual Japanese born players. It's not a big sport over there. It's not particularly high on their sort of list of sports. They're finding those sort of raw materials, if you like, of young Japanese players coming through. That could take some time. I mean, the guys like Leach and the South African Labuschagne, whatever that these guys aren't going to be around forever. Who's replacing them? Is it another foreigner, or are there genuinely Japanese young Japanese players coming forward? That would be the only obstacle for me. Otherwise, it seems to be a great place to play rugby. The stadiums are fantastic. I said the fans are,
very rich economy.
Yeah, very rich economy. Absolutely easy to get around. So I guess there is a bit of a distance travel between South Africa, Argentina, Japan, and New Zealand, Australia. That is a lot of travel. But the Aussies and the Kiwis have been doing that for years, so I don't see that being a particular obstacle. But I think it just needs to be handled right. And as you say, it's essential that they're rewarded for the progress they've made. Otherwise, what incentive is there for any union, any of the tier 2 nations to keep improving?
You're right about the mainstays, Leach and other people. But if you look, the halfbacks, both Japanese, tremendous decision makers, very adept, basic skills, good. Both wingers, fullback, Shonohori, the hooker. Yeah. The real, apart from Leach, the real standout and Labuschagne, the real stars were all indigenous Japanese.
That's good.
And if it turns out that, like Australia, they suddenly get a front five that's full of whatever to bolster them, well, everyone else is doing that. Yeah. Provided they get the core of the team, and I think this is important for the natural progression and the inspiration for the Japanese boys and girls to play, provided they get those bits right and augment it. I don't have a problem with that.
Absolutely, I agree with that as well, Maura. I guess the difficulty is finding, because rugby's not big at schoolboy level, it's a similar sort of problem the Americans have, finding props and second row forwards, the tight five forwards who have been playing that position for many years, from the age of 10, 12, whatever it is. Americans, physicality, in terms of their fitness and all that, they're fine, but they do struggle with the technical sides of things like scrums and line-outs and throwing the ball. So I see that the Japanese having the same sort of issues as where their young props coming from, where their young second rows coming from. But
sumo who can run.
That'd be ideal, wouldn't it? Yeah, run and jump.
You've got Fiji they've not been anywhere near as successful. But again, I come back to this. If they had and they replicated the sort of success that Japan have had, they've got to be given not a large pat on the back, pat on the head. Yeah, we'll include you now because you've made it almost embarrassing not to.
Yeah.
No, you come in. You've got a right to come in.
Yeah.
Sorry, if someone has to drop out, well, you've got to get back in, etc., etc. Yeah. We'll leave that there. South Africa. We're talking to Rupert Moon about it. I did a job. They were unashamedly dull about it, and they needed to be because they certainly second half they stopped the Japanese keeping the ball, which could have been a problem for them. But to me, they've got several players who are extravagantly talented, and not just big box merchants, although they've got those as well. And to me, to break down Wales, and certainly if they were to get to a final against either England or New Zealand, they just need to be a bit more ambitious.
Yeah, it's easy to say that, and that is very true. The difficulty is, I think we both know at semi-finals, everyone gets a bit cagey. The occasion gets on top, and actually going too far from your sort of your touchstone, your foundation, is a difficult ask. I think the South Africans have got a lot more attacking qualities than far more we saw at the weekend. They've got some outstanding players.
No, I absolutely agree. I think they're going to have to use them.
Yeah, they are. That's exactly the point. The halfbacks were on top form. I think Faf de Klerk is arguably the form 9 after Aaron Smith, I'd say. But yeah, you're right. They need to come out of the shell a bit. They need to play. You can't play Wales at their own game and just sit and control ball possession and kick penalties out, because Wales have been doing that for a couple of years now.
If they got through against Wales, and if for example they met New Zealand again, I can see a repeat where they have 20 minutes of hammering them, and they go in 17 points to 3 down, because that's what New Zealand do.
Yeah.
And you can't just run over them because they don't let you. And England don't let teams run over them either.
No. Yeah, I think I can't agree with that more. South Africans need to sort of break out take off the handcuffs or break the shackles is what I'm trying to say. Because I think it's the same for all 4 countries really in the semi-final. I don't think you can just grind out wins at this in this sort of modern rugby. I think you need to play a bit more than certainly in my day and your day, when you could actually just drag a game down to your pace and really control it. I think.
From England, you certainly can't close the All Blacks down for sufficient time to shut them out of a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to have. They'll have periods on top. You just outscore them in yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key to both the games, isn't it? It's easy to say it sat in a studio here. It's just a bit more difficult to put it into action out there. But yeah, I think two really enthralling semi-finals coming up. I thought all 4 quarterfinals were cracking displays, really good games to watch from a neutral point of view, let alone with the English win. And I think 2 semi-finals. There's genuinely these are the 4 best teams, and I think these are 2 games that are just so difficult to call at the moment. But yeah, should be a cracking weekend hopefully.
Well, head and heart, my head with the All Blacks says a narrow win, but actually I just have a feeling England might do it. To me, it is, and I said this earlier. If they get the kicking game right, so much else follows from that. If they get that wrong, it will go badly wrong to me.
Yeah.
If they get that right, then I think they've got the wherewithal, possibly could do it. I just wonder if this is a match too far for the Welsh.
Yeah, I think so.
Especially without Jonathan Davies, if he's not fit.
Yeah, again, without wanting to bang on about it, I just think the Welsh are a little bit too conservative. They haven't got game breakers as such, or certainly not that we've seen enough of in the tournament. They'll stick in there, of course they will. They'll fight to the bitter end, but I do just think South Africa got a little bit of magic from Cheslin Colby or someone like that, Faf de Klerk, someone like that, who just come out of nowhere and break the game open. And I think once they get ahead, South Africa are quite difficult to catch. They're very physical. They've got good defenders. They've got good tacklers as well. So if they get a foothold in the game, I don't really see the Welsh being able to overhaul them. I
tell you about Faf de Klerk, not just what he's doing, around the base and sniping, keeping bodyguards interested. He's box kicking. You watch him several times. He runs across the field, shadowing players. that were looking to do loop moves and suddenly appearing.
Yeah.
Why are you there?
He's a smart player, isn't he?
He's a very smart player.
3 or 4 times he came around the side of the scrum and just followed the scrum half and tackled him as he got that run around ball. As you said, one of them he intercepted it. He was there before the scrum half got there. He was hassling him all day. He just hit him just after he passed the ball. He was flying off the side of rucks at him in defence. I think he had a real bee in his bonnet. I don't know. He obviously insulted his mum or something like that. I don't know. He was hassling the Japanese 9 all day.
Well, the Gallagher Premiership starts this weekend. Bristol, Northampton, Worcester, Exeter, Gloucester and London Irish all got off to a winning start. Difficult in a World Cup season. You don't know whether your returning stars will be full of everything and kick on, or whether naturally with some of them they'll just be a bit out of sorts. Bearing that in mind, can you see anyone challenging what were the 2 outstanding teams, and they've been for about 3 years really, the Chiefs and Sarries?
Yeah, difficult to look past those 2 for the finalists. However, this is only based on 1 round of fixtures, and that's it. I think Northampton look like they could be the real deal, and when they get a few of their guys back, and Owen Franks coming in to shore up the scrum a bit, I think they could turn some heads without doubt.
They progressed a lot quicker than I thought they would.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Well, last year they were outstanding, and Chris Boyd came in and seemed to turn things around almost instantaneously, along with Sam Vesti coming over there from Worcester. Their attacking game was outstanding. I think the only questions around them are sort of in the set piece, in the front 5 and scrum wise. I think they do look a little bit vulnerable at the moment, but elsewhere they're laden with talent. They've got a lot of good back rowers, half backs look sharp. James Grayson, I think, is without putting too much pressure on a young lad, I think he's destined for great things.
Bristol look to have improved.
Yeah, they look very good actually. Made some good signings, made a lot of signings, spent a lot of cash. But the guys, I mean, Nathan Jones was obviously the sort of the standout of the new. Sorry, Nathan Jones, Bananarama. Nathan Hughes.
Been gone too long.
Yeah, he was the standout probably of the new signings for them. But they've got guys coming back as well. If they can shore up, I'm still a little bit sceptical about John O'Fower as a scrummaging tight head. He does seem to give away a few penalties, and if they can shore up the scrum, there'll be more than the challenge for most people. I think Gloucester as well. Gloucester winning up at Sale themselves look good on paper as well. Yeah, there's probably 3 or 4 teams now similar to last year. There's big soup in the middle, but I think 3 or 4 teams are slightly better than the rest, if that makes sense.
Well, generally, the team that comes up has had a bit of a battle, to say the very least. But London Irish have spent. They spent quite big. Yeah. And an away win to Wasp. Jackson coming over, after his travails, shall we say, in Ulster. He was impressive. It's not just as simple as buying players, even good players, but you have a bit of a better chance if you've got them there. Can you see them having the wherewithal to stay up? I mean, it's going to be a huge scrap again, as it always is. But
yeah, I think it will. I mean, I think they certainly on paper they look a lot better than Worcester, who beat Leicester at the weekend. So yeah, there's still some doubts and questions about Leicester, although they have got a lot of guys to come back and sort of shore up the side after the World Cup. I think we probably saw Worcester's first team on Sunday, and that's about it. I can't think off the top of my head if they got many coming back from World Cup duty with anyone. So I think on the basis of one game, I think London Irish look a lot better than probably those 2 teams, Worcester, Leicester, and also Wasps.
Have you any inside track on Leicester as to how they've been progressing pre-season and what have you? Feelings?
Not particularly inside. I mean, there's been lots of rumblings coming out of the camp in the local press about how good pre-season was. How they had a full pre-season this year with Geordie Murphy as opposed to last year where Matt O'Connor turned up late and that seemed to sort of put them on the back foot to begin with. However, they didn't play the same game on Sunday that they've been playing the Premiership Cup, which was a pretty positive experience for them. They won 3 out of 4 games, I think. I don't know. It's obviously it's the first competitive fixture. Worcester were up for it. Worcester were I say at full strength pretty much, and needed to get off to a good start. Just really disappointed with Leicester have opened the account. Kicking game was particularly poor, as we mentioned earlier with England. It's terrible with Leicester at the moment, kicking possession away. Defence seemed a little better. Set piece was okay, but there just didn't seem to be a huge amount of go forward, and certainly not. They claim to be a lot fitter than last year, but I'm not sure there's too much evidence of that, to be honest.
Well, that's all we have time for this week on Brian Moore's Full Contact in association with the Telegraph Mitsubishi Motors. Thank you to my co-host George Chuter, and as always to all our guests. When we come back, we will know who are the World Cup finalists. So be sure to tune in next Monday, and we'll obviously be looking back at the semis and forward to the final. In the meantime, why not subscribe to the podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode during what's left of the Rugby World Cup and beyond, and make sure you write to review if you want to whilst you're there. But for now, it's goodbye.
Full Contact, in association with Mitsubishi Motors. Drive your ambition.